Hello, y'all. So we are just going to jump right on into our topic, and we have a topic none other today, and we're going to be talking about healing from divorce and freeing your mind to move on. We have special guest, Mr. Ronnie Russell, who's going to be joining us here in just a moment. But first, we want to let Shonda say something.
So, good evening, everyone. I am so excited to jump into this topic on this evening. I have been a person who has experienced some of the pain and the trauma from divorce, and I know that a lot of people have too. So, I think that we have a good segment on tonight. I think we have some really good questions to have answered on this evening, and I'm just prayerful that this is going to be a blessing to us all. So, I'll let Shirley handle the backgrounds and how we got here, and then I guess we just jump right in.
Absolutely. So, welcome, Mr. Russell, to the broadcast of healing from divorce and freeing your mind to move on. So, we want to just jump right into how we ended up on this topic. So, we've been talking a lot about different like relationships and healing throughout all of 2020. We've had some really major segments on some things, and so how we got to this particular topic is I remember first, maybe we should give the background of Shonda already told us that she's been divorced before and all of those things. And so for me, I've been divorced for 2 years now, about 2.5 years now. And I remember right after my divorce was final in 2018, I'm walking about, I'm doing my own thing, I'm going through my own process. And I began to encounter women who would just come up to me randomly, seem like complete strangers, telling me all of their business. They're harping on this man that left them or this, that, and the other. And I'm thinking to myself, well, how long have you been divorced? And they would tell me, I've been divorced 5 years. I've been divorced 10 years. I'm like, why are you still talking about this dude then? Like life goes on, right? So finding that people are sometimes still bitter. People are still hurt and angry, which does nothing for them in the long run. It eats you down, it wears you out. And so I was like, wow, this is something that really needs to be talked about. It needs to be handled with care, first of all, because people go through things all the time and they may not know how to deal with it. And so for me, coming through my process and God allowing me to recover so quickly, yes, I have days, I have moments, should I say, they're not even days anymore, but coming through that process and allowing myself to be healed, allow that healing process to take place, wanting to show other people, not just women, but men, how to do it too. And so this is how we got to healing from divorce and freeing your mind to move on. So go ahead, Mr. Russell, what you got?
Um, I'm just an innocent bystander.
Right.
I totally understand, especially the subject of it. Me myself, I've been divorced twice. So I have some skin in the game with this conversation, being that I've been a part of the experience of it. The emotional side, the financial side, and just having the ability to move on is going to take time, and we just have to understand that whether you're the man or the woman, time is the main thing that we have to look at.
Okay. So in saying those things about time, do we sometimes blame time on our deep seated fears, things that we hold on to, grudges, instead of allowing ourselves to get into the place of where we can move on? Because I believe, for me, I believe some people blame our lack of moving forward on time when there's many different factors.
Okay. You said, do we blame it on ourselves or on our fears?
No, we blame our fears, we blame our ability to move on with time and saying it takes time. Well, 20 years has now passed and still
Well,
stuck in the same place.
you have to look at what is your definition of time. If your definition of time is a a moment, a minute, or an elapse, your time is your time. If it takes you 15 years to get over the the hurt, then that is your time that it's going to take you to heal. We just have to look at it, let that person heal. That's the main thing. If it takes you five, cool. If it takes you 5 months, cool too. But as long as you heal before you move on to the next relationship, or before you move on, period. To me, that's all that matters.
All right. Go ahead, Shonda.
Um, so Mr. Russell said something very key. He said, before you move on to the next person or the next situation, make sure that you heal first, whether that takes 5, 10, or 15 years. And so I think that that's the most important portion that we need to keep in mind. I don't necessarily agree that if it takes you 15 years to heal, then it just takes you 15 years to heal. As a therapist and as a counselor and as someone that's spiritual, I recognize that if it's taking you that long to heal, you're probably stuck, and you probably need some help. And I'm not saying that everybody shouldn't heal in their own time. You absolutely should. But 15 years to heal from a type of breakup indicates there's a stuckness there, some issue or something that you have been unwilling to face at that particular point in time. So you're long past the point where you need time to heal, and now you're at the point where you need some assistance because there's some stuckness there. You should be able to get to the point where you are able to live some type of normalcy past a certain point. Do I feel like we should rush people through their healing process? No, but I do feel sometimes that we just blame it on time. Shirley, to answer the question, yeah, we do. We say that it takes time, that it needs time, when really it's a situation where we've voided healing in that particular area.
Okay, that's good on both sides of the coin. And so, of course, our opinions are all valuable in what we feel and believe. And so, allowing ourselves to come to the point where we realize that it's needed, that we are snapping off on people. I remember a span of time back in, it was 2018, early 2019, but more so in 2018. Of course, it was fresh. So I remember certain instances um, it would trigger me. And at first I didn't realize that it was a trigger. Like I had certain smells would send me into a deep like depression. I am in the bed for 3 days. Like, what is this? So there were things that really sent me into another level. But once I recognized what those triggers were, I was able to combat them, to confront them, and tell them, I'm not going to live that way. I'm not going to stay in my bed all week. There's life to be had. So I'm going to decide that I want to move on with my life. I want to, be in relationship. I want to have a happy life, but knowing that a happy life comes from within you with your relationship with God. And that's for me. And so, yeah, everyone needs to know those triggers. But I remember again in 2018, at the end of 2018, going through this serious progression of steps. Like after that, so I was already retired. I had time to think, had time to sit still, right? Which I really didn't have before then. Time to sit still, time to learn who I was, time to travel, things that I had not done. And even in traveling alone throughout 2018, because I went everywhere. Like I was in California, I went to where I was on the West Coast, I went all the way to the East Coast and everywhere in between. And I did a lot of traveling. A lot of it was business travel, but it was also personal, get yourself together travel, right? And so even in that travel time, I was learning about who I was. I was learning who I was created to be. I was learning that I can be by myself and be just fine. I don't know how long y'all were married in y'all first marriages or second marriages. But for me, I was married for 16 years, together with him for 18. That was my entire adulthood, right? So that's a long span of time to have to readjust to figure it out on your own, to do it on your own. And so even through that process of the first book that we wrote of Grace to Recover, how to divorce hurt, addiction, and overcome trials with the power of a loving God, that spoke to me because I learned that divorce wasn't just from a person, but it's from idealizations. It is from negative thoughts. It is from negative people as a whole. So divorce doesn't just have to deal with divorcing from a person, from leaving from a person, it has to deal with ourselves. What in us do we need to get rid of so that we can move on to the next progression in life? I don't want to say step or next thing in life, but the next progression in life. And so divorce has a multifaceted definition in my book. It does, but I didn't really discover that until after the divorce was final, after I saw other women's stories come together and realizing, okay, well, they were getting rid of not just of something that another person or another person leaving them, but it was different emotions that tied them down, that kept them stuck. So divorce really is a multifaceted word.
Mm.
So what y'all
I
got
agree with you,
on
Shirley.
this? Uh-huh.
No, I agree with you, Shirley. And when you get ready to talk about divorce, there's always a process that goes into separating yourself from anything. So there's this
Mm-hmm.
process of grief that you have to go through when you decide to go through a divorce from anything, any type of separation from anything, because it changes what used to be into something different. And so you kind of have to wrap your mind around being different than you were. There's some forgiveness that has to happen, that has to be extended not only towards the situation and the other person involved, but also towards yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Too, you have to deal with whatever negative thoughts and feelings that you have as associated with the demise of your marriage or whatever thing
Mm-hmm.
you're separating from. Right, like you said, divorce can be a bunch of different things, but like there's thoughts that come up. I know for myself, I dealt with some of the feelings of you know God wouldn't forgive me because I had
Mm-hmm.
gotten divorced, or that God was angry with me or wasn't pleased with me, or that I was a failure because my marriage
Mm-hmm.
failed.
That was a
That
dead one for me.
Yeah, that was a really bad one for me. Was I making a bad decision? Maybe we just didn't try hard enough. Um, Recognizing that we say these things when we get into love relationships. Oh, he's my all, he's my everything, they're my one and only, they're the breath that I breathe. We say all these things that we don't really understand exactly what we're doing when we say them.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
then it with that relationship ending, now you have to deal with the fact that you call this person your very breath. So now
Right.
so now you snatching your breath away from you, and
Wow.
there's this physical
That's
pain
deep.
associated, with
Mm-hmm.
that. This person is my all in all. So now your all in all is being taken away from you. What do you have left when your all is leaving you? There's this physical
Mm.
pain of separation that we have to deal with too, having made all these declarations about who the person
Right.
is to us. And then you kind of got to find like a new normal. Like when you go from sleeping with a person every night to then now you're completely alone in that bed, like that king size
Mm-hmm.
bed just ain't the same no more
It's not.
when
It's
that
not.
person is no longer there. So you have to go about sleeping a different way. I sleep on my husband's chest, so I sleep on my left side. If he's no longer there, I don't know if I can sleep on my left side anymore. I might have to find a whole new way to go to sleep now, because I was so used to, my body had gotten accustomed to laying a
Mm-hmm.
certain way, being a specific way in order to relax and fall asleep. So now you have to come up with a whole new normal. My husband is my movie partner. So now I don't have a movie partner no more. If we decide that we're going to break up, now who am I going to go to the movies with? Who am I going to spend my time with? Who am I going
Mm-hmm.
to bounce my ideas off of? So there's this whole type of new normal now that you have to develop in order to move on. And so sometimes we don't do that. We don't know that we need to do that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
To go on, to move on from there. And then, who who warns you about what happens when you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning? And usually it's the other person, the spouse, that goes and checks on everything and makes sure everything is safe. And now you're home and you're alone, and the person who usually makes you feel safe is no longer there to make you feel safe. So there's a whole loss of a bunch of different things that you
Mm-hmm.
have to process it and move through when you're talking about getting divorced. And it's not the easiest thing. And so sometimes we have wrong perceptions or wrong convictions about it that keep us from being able to heal and to move on. So that's what I meant by a point of stuckness. Sometimes we get so far into our thought process about what a situation means for us that we forget that we make our own meaning.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
determine what this means to me. So if I believe that divorce is death, then that's the thought that I'm going to carry, and that's what I'm going to act out on. But if I believe that divorce is the ending of a thing and a new beginning of something else, then I begin to
Mm-hmm.
act that way too, and that becomes healthy for me, whereas for somebody else it might not be healthy. So the way that we think and conceptualize about a thing helps us to either stay stuck or to move on.
Right.
Yes.
I
Go
think,
ahead.
especially when you're going through that process and you, you get that final stamp that you know that on paper that's it. I mean, you walking out of the courthouse like, okay,
What next,
this
right?
is for real. I mean, I don't care if you feel you're the strong one or what. Like for me, when you're beginning that process, there has to be a development of a healthy balance between your healing and your hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you create that balance between your healing and your hurt, that means you're allowing yourself to acknowledge that you're hurting, but you also understand that there is something right now that you're healing from. So that means you're working on it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at that, you have the ability to say, okay, to me, sometimes it's good to compartmentalize because you can pull it in, you can look at it, you can examine it, you can say, okay, um, I feel this way when I'm here, or I feel this way, like you're saying, when I smell this, or I feel this way when I'm driving past this place that reminds you of whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Those are triggers. But then when you say, okay, I'm going to drive past this place because I know that I'm still me. So I'm healing from that. It still hurt me, but I'm strong enough to understand that hurt. But I'm brave enough to maneuver and to heal. So to me, like for me, I was young, got married at 18. So my a whole adult life, because both of them was 10 years, collectively 20. But so my whole adult life, you lose a part of you, especially when
Definitely.
you get married young.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get married young, and that part of you that you lose is your level of innocence as maturing. So
Yeah.
then you take on somebody else growth,
Mm-hmm.
however they were growing with you, however you were growing with them. So now that growth is taken away from that. Okay, let me figure out who I am now. So that's where that balance between your healing and your hurt to me came from, because it allowed me to be okay with saying, man, I'm hurting right now, but I'm still healing from this because I'm working on it. So
Mm-hmm.
it was hard, in the beginning, for me, because I'm the one who filed. So for me, you have to get to a point to where you say, did you or did you not try all that you know that you could have tried? Did you
Mm-hmm.
actually do something, or did you try to pour it on that other person? Or did you accept your responsibility in it, whether it's in the conversation or in the decision about going through with the divorce? So to me, especially young, I mean, I can't speak for everybody who got married at a much more older age, but at 18, man, you still learning how it is to be out of the house,
Right.
and it was different for me.
Good stuff. Well, I actually had someone to ask me that very question. Did you do all that you knew to do or that you could do? Um, Matter of fact, they asked me, could you stand up in front of a pastor and say that? I said, no doubt. Not only can I do that, but I can go in front of God and say I did all that I could do. He knows that I did all that I could do on my end, because we can't force anyone else to want something. We can't force anyone else to be right. We can't force anyone else to do the right thing. We can't force anyone else to honor us. We can't force really anyone to do what is not in them to do, right? So we just have to be at the point where we can acknowledge the part that we played in it. Was I an angel in it? Absolutely not. I had my own faults. I had my own wrongs, and the things that I did, whether it was silence, not speaking at all, or well, mainly mine was silence, and not saying anything, not allowing myself to be vulnerable enough to speak my piece and my truth. And when the things hurt, that I did not voice those things because there was a point where my voice didn't matter. So when you feel like your voice doesn't matter, then you stop talking. Like Maya Angelou, she had, if y'all know her history, there was someone, I believe in her family, that molested her or raped her, and she told her mother. And before she knew it, it wasn't long after that they found this person dead. So she thought in her little mind, in her young innocent mind, that her speaking up was the cause of this person dying. And Miss Maya Angelou stopped talking for, I want to say it was like 7 years. She stopped talking. That is so significant. But when she began to talk again, everything turned around for her because she made a decision that everything that she speaks will be positive. It's going to change lives in a good manner. And everyone around the world, not just in the United States, knows who Maya Angelou was, right? Because she chose her words that was going to make a positive impact on people. And so that's kind of almost the same thing for me. I did not speak my piece. I did not speak my truth because I felt like my words didn't matter. It was played out to where it didn't matter. So I stopped talking. Was that the wrong thing to do? Absolutely. I should have spoken up, but I didn't know how to at the time. And maybe that's why I talk so much now. I don't know. But anyway. So I promise to make my words count when I do say something.
Most of the time, when problems that lead to divorce are usually things that can be worked out. But a lot of times, the hurt and the pain from past attempts at working it out causes a barrier between the two people. And so it becomes a situation that can be unbearable. But we don't always do everything that can be done because, of course, hindsight is 2020. Looking at this on this end of my divorce, I can always say, well, I should have done this or I should have done that, or he could have done this or he could have done that. But in that particular moment, neither one of us was aware of the way that our actions were causing these ripple effects in our relationship. And you kind of don't when you're in the middle of it. So even when you're in the relationship and when you're out of the relationship, there are different triggers that come to either help you in your situation or they keep you stuck in your situation, right? So if I'm in a relationship with a person and I haven't healed from anything that's happened in my past, and certain things from that are going to trigger me to act a certain way that's going to create a wall between me and my spouse. So that could be anything from parent wounding to any type of intimate relationship with another person. It could be some scarring from some spiritual hurts. It could be almost anything. But when that comes up, if I don't handle that properly, then I create a wall between me and my spouse. What I need to understand about that particular point is that you're going to have triggers. You don't get through life without going through life, right? So you can't get out without some bump. You just can't. You can't get out without being marked by life in some type of way. So everybody has a trigger in some type of thing. Everybody has a circumstance that leads them to feel a certain way. And mine isn't yours. I got chased by a dog when I was younger. That might make me scared of dogs. It might make somebody else feel a kinship towards dogs where they can't let them go. You never know how your trauma is going to affect, but it's okay. We all have triggers. We all have areas that are either unhealed or that have created different responses from us. The issue is that we're not all the time transparent or vulnerable with the person in front of us. And so then we begin to create more issues. So when you get married, you don't stop your old issues. You just add another set of issues. And when you get divorced, you don't stop your old issues. You just add another set of issues. You will always have issues that need to be worked through. We as people just need to understand that we have to work through them. And so sometimes we don't work through them. And that's when they create problems between us and other people. So when I come into a relationship with another person, I am taking on a whole new set of issues because I'm taking them and whatever baggage they bring. And if I'm not
Mm-hmm.
equipped or prepared to deal with somebody else's baggage, I'm probably going to end up walking away. So did you do everything that you could in the relationship to avoid divorce? Probably not. You probably didn't, they probably didn't. But it does not mean that you weren't still right or wrong for being divorced. There's no right or wrong there. There's will you work through it? Yes or no at the end of it. Will you work through it? Will you work through your marriage? Yes or no? Will you work through your problems? Yes or no? Will you be understanding of this other person's problems? Yes or no? That's the bottom line of it. So we need to remove a lot of those negative conversations, because sometimes those negative conversations keep people in situations that are more hurtful than healthy.
Most definitely. You post the
Right.
question, will you work through it? Yes or no.
Yes.
That means that just makes it plain and simple. Either you're willing to or you're not, no matter what the situation is, no matter what the problem is. And it all comes down to the heart. What is the heart of the matter? Where is your heart? And what is it saying? There was a question that was posed that has to deal with the same thing. What have you done to fix the problems? That takes an open, honest communication. That takes being vulnerable. That takes um, sitting down and being very uncomfortable, trying over and over and over again, exhausting those possibilities. So I remember times where the conversations seemed like they hit a wall. I would be up talking all night long, and the next day it's the same crap all over and over again. And I'm not bashing anyone because it's life. It happened, and we've moved on from that. But just knowing that it takes a willingness on both parts, and when somebody gets tired and to that point where it is a battle to get out of the bed. It's a battle to face you, to say anything to you. That's a miserable life. And I don't ever want to live a miserable life ever again. And I'm not going to. So making up our minds to do all that we can humanly do, whether we did it all that we were supposed to do, like you said, Shonda. No, probably not, because it would still be lasting. However, I don't believe it was God's will for it to last any longer. So there you go. Um, so if anyone else would like to answer the question, what have you done or what did you do to try to fix the problems?
So I got a question. So when you say you
You got
don't
to
think
answer
it,
my question first. I'm just
oh
joking.
this
Go ahead.
this goes off of what you said. You said you don't think it
Okay.
was God's will for it to last.
Yeah.
Uh, why do you say that?
I say that because there is a permissive will and there is a perfect will of God. And when you step out of God's will in the first place, trying to get what you want,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have to pay the consequences of that. It was not his will in the first place for me to be married to that particular person. However, I was doing what I wanted to do and I had to pay the consequences of that. Now, did he bring some real good stuff out of it? Absolutely, he did. My children are an example of that. What I'm doing now is an example of that. But I could not have reached this point without having gone through some of those trials, some of those testing trials, some of the skills that I learned, and so he worked it out for my good.
Mm-hmm.
But the Bible tells us that he works all things together for our good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. So because his hand was on me all along, even though I did the wrong thing, his hand was still covering me to show me some things, to get me where I need to be for the future. If I had not gone through those things, I know for certain that I would not be prepared for what he has coming next.
Okay. I just want to get a understanding because like with Shonda when she said, did she feel that God was upset and angry with her by making a decision of going through divorce? And then on your end, you said it was God's will. So I was kind of like, okay, is it still within the will of the Father if it wasn't His will for you to continue to be married? How does that?
It's his will for us to get it right. Now it's up to, like I said, it's up to, God does not strong arm us and tell us you have to do this.
Mm-hmm.
That book that we were reading last year said the four wills of God. There are four simple things that he commands in his word. And outside of those four simple things, we are really free to make our own choices. We're the ones that make it hard. We're the ones that are filled with religious angst about different things. We've been taught some wrong things that we thought were right for many years, right? And so until God shows us, um, until we allow ourselves, let me
Right.
put it that way, because God
Right.
has always been trying to show us,
Right. Okay.
until we allow ourselves to understand that, to get around people who understand that, till we allow ourselves to come away from the stuff that we were taught that wasn't necessarily Bible, it was religion, it was tradition.
Right.
When we allow ourselves to seek God for ourselves and realize that it ain't that deep,
Right.
basically, it's
Right.
not that deep. Our relationship with God, He wants a relationship, plain and simple. It's like any other relationship that we desire. He wants an intimate relationship with us. When we can get our intimate relationship right with the Father, we can have right standing, long lasting, intimate relationships with people on earth. That is how He desires for it to be. So when we can get to that point, I believe that He allows us to flourish in the things that we have. Like I say, there is no, like she says, there is no really right or wrong answer. Some people go through a marriage and one spouse cheats, but they decide that they're going to stay together. It's not right. It's not wrong. Right. Another person who has been abused in their marriage, to leave or to stay, that is their individual choice. Um, what God want his people, he want his children to be abused? No, that's not Bible. So when people say, hang in there, and there was a whole lot of old church cliches that the old mothers used to talk about. I don't believe any of that. I don't believe that stuff. Why? Because I've been there, I've done that, I've seen it, and it's not Bible. God didn't say that. His word didn't say that. So when we learn to detach ourselves from what all this other stuff is and get our own relationship with God, then we can go further. And honestly, that's what this divorce did for me. I was saved before, but I was hurt. I was a little bitter. I will say, a little angry, but I was internally angry. I think I was angry at myself. I felt like I caused it. Why didn't I do such and such? Why didn't I listen, God, when you told me this, that, and the other? Now I wouldn't be here. So when we blame ourselves, we still stuck. When we blame other people, we're still stuck. So just having that open mind to want to get it right with God, I think that's what's most important. And I know I went all around what you asked, but go ahead.
Nah, you good. I can completely understand your point of view on that. Um, but we still, as individuals, have those God given abilities as well as wisdom. So there was something that like I've been teaching my mentee a little bit. Like God gives us, men and women, sometimes the equal amount of dosage. Meaning, God will give you wisdom, man and woman. God will give you the spirit of discernment, man and woman. But it's weird. But then He gives the woman intuition. But then He gives the man like his gut feeling. And those are the things, like when you're in that divorce, there's some gut feelings that you're going to have to take on to understand, like, man, this doesn't feel right. Now let me try to do something else. You have to make that conscious decision, for one, to say, we need professional help. And then you ask the other person, are you willing to go through this with me?
Yeah.
But then when you ask that question, it's like you're really asking the question as, hopefully it's a deciding factor. If you say no, cool, I'm going through with the divorce. But if you say yes, like, oh man, all right, so now let's work on it. To me, there should always be a conversation of professional help before you finally begin to go through with the separation, then go through with the full divorce. But I think, having and seeking professional help would allow you to begin to possibly break down the walls that you have within yourself. Like for me, I've gone through the professional side and sitting with counselors, and they make you, here's a sheet of paper, write this down. Here's a sheet of paper for you. You write this down. Write 10 things you like about him. Write 10 things you like about her. All this other stuff. But then those experiences sitting down with the professional help allow me on the back end of the final stamp paperwork to say, okay, now let me reflect on what could have been different, because we've tried the professional side. We tried sitting down with a mediator that we both have a mutual understanding of who this person is in our lives. So to me, I think we have to look at all of those things. If the divorce is the final decision that you are making, you have to then bring that other person into that thought. They're just like when a man comes home and the wife said, we need to talk. You're like, oh man, what's she talking about? But then when you have that conversation about divorce, you're starting to think about so many different things that, okay, let's go to sit down and have professional help. I mean, it's just, to me, it's your decision. Your decision of professional help, your decision of personal help, your decision of spiritual help, your decision of just sitting down and writing it down for your own personal being. Because what you don't want to do is, when you divorce, is you build more walls for yourself. Because it's going to be harder for you to adjust, because you're building walls on top of the walls that you had. Then your body going to start to get affected. You're going to get ulcers. You're not going to be able to sleep. You're going to be crying. You're going to be upset. I mean, you're going to go through so many different emotions, and then your spirit is going to be worn because you're fatigued. So to me, going through those divorces, you have to acknowledge that if that was the end state, to me, just look at what was your responsibility in it. And your wall is your wall. She might have some bricks to add on to your wall, and you may have been the masonry into building those walls up, but you got to begin to tear those down, but understand that the wall does exist.
It does indeed. I remember first of all, I didn't file for divorce. I actually wanted to in 2016. But I had had a person who stepped in and called me and was like, and asked me directly, are you thinking about getting a divorce, about filing for divorce? And I'm like, God, I hate you. Like, that was kind of like my internal thought. Like, you sent this woman to tell me that it was not his will for me to initiate the paperwork. So what I did was I pulled out my Bible and I began to search the scriptures, because I want to know, God, what are you talking about? Because this man ain't right. He ain't treating me right. And I have every reason and right, I'm saying to myself, to leave. So I start searching the scriptures, and I'm searching all of them. And I think there's like 56 of them. And so when I began to understand my role and my responsibility, and give it back to God, then I was a lot better. But I remember the final day of divorce, final day of court. And y'all saw me over here laughing, because when you were saying that, my mind went all the way back. Yeah, I might have had them papers, might have been a hard thing for y'all. But when it was over and I went down to the secretary's office to pick them up with the stamp on it, I said, and y'all make sure y'all have a good day. And I waved it in front of him and I walked out, because you don't know who you just left. So, so that was me. It was a huge weight off of my shoulders. It was a huge breath of fresh air to know that God released me. I did not do it on my own. And I know that when we do it the way God would have us to do it, then nothing else and nobody else can stop us. We cannot be stopped from what God has for us if we do it according to his will. And so because I said that, because I had every option I could have, because he doesn't hold us. He doesn't hold a rope over us, right? We do have free will. We can do whatever we want to. We can do whatever we feel that we're big and bad enough to do, right? So, but he does not hold us. He doesn't hold us hostage. And so I very well could have continued on my process and done it myself, right? But I wouldn't be sitting here today, not in my right mind. I would not have peace like I have it. I would not be able to stand here and talk candidly and freely about this topic. I would not be in the place right now where I am. The publishing company would have never happened. None of this would have happened had I done it the way I wanted to do it. And so I'm just so grateful even to be at this point and knowing that life does go on, and ministry coming out of it, knowing that I can talk to someone who may be going through their process. All of our processes are different. Um, and we are all on this journey, but I know that he doesn't put us here for ourselves. He gives us certain people in our lives at certain points that where we can help them along the way. Does it require for us to go through something? A lot of times, yes. Is it hurtful? Is it painful sometimes? Yeah, it is. But when we can come outside of ourselves and recognize that there is a bigger picture in everything, then I think it makes for life to be better. What y'all feel about that?
No, I agree.
Mr. Russell?
That's it. You're just gonna say I agree.
I mean, what could be more complete than I agree?
That's like a
How can two walk together except that they agree?
Okay. That holds some truth. Um, so I agree. I'll just I'll just say that too. I agree.
See? And now we all three agree. And the three chord strand can't be easily broken. So can't nobody come up in here and change what we all agree with. Good,
Come
good,
on
good,
now. Mic drop. Yes. So again, we do go through processes. So we have to understand that these processes, they are coming, they are there to make us stronger. They're there to make us better. God does not take us through things for us to be bitter. He does not take us through things. He doesn't allow us to go through things so that we would turn away from him. But he's a lot of times he's trying to show us something. He's trying to show us and give us better. But it's up to us to accept better. So when you were talking, Mr. Russell, about going and getting professional help, and then if that other person decides that they don't want to, and then it's time to sign the divorce papers. So for me, I think it's important that a person reaches out for help, not just for a partnership, but for themselves. Um, Even in that. And so I remember asking, hey, do you want to go and get counseling, this, that, and the other? And he was like, I don't need counseling, this, that, and other. But I didn't go seek help for myself. And I believe that I should have. I should have gone to sit down with somebody else for me, not for anybody else, but for me, so that my heart could be right, so that I would know my place in it, my part in it, and really get some outside self help to seek that godly counsel for myself. You know, I think that that's important because sometimes we wait on other people to get the help that we need. We came in this world by ourselves, and we gonna go by ourselves.
Right.
So
I think
go ahead.
some of that goes into what um, what have you been exposed to? I mean, because if your parents went through a divorce, you might have seen some things that you may have been exposed to. So then you only think, well, let's go to marital counseling. Okay, so now you don't feel there should be individual counseling because you're only having conversations and you may have only been experienced with marital counseling. But we are a lot older now in our years, so like there's more words and conversations that talks about self-worth and self-awareness and self-care and things like that. So there are more tools now
Mm-hmm.
that a person has been exposed
Mm-hmm.
to go and seek out all levels of professional help,
Mm-hmm.
personal, couples, or just somebody with another couple coming in the room, y'all having those conversations. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really what we were exposed to at that age is totally different to how we're exposed now. Of course, hindsight right now, it was like, oh man, I should have went somewhere for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Would it had made it different now? If you did, would you still be married, or I would say from my own personal side, should I had gone to the military retreats a lot more than saying like, oh man, I don't want to go to that military stuff. That's stupid. But but what if I did go? Would we had sparked the whole different conversation? Or what if when we sat down with Pastor so and so or brother so and so at the time, and then when she might not have wanted to go, and I was like, okay, let's go. Then I'm like, okay, fine. And then like she's pressure. Like to me, sometimes like in divorce, we try on different times, and then the struggle begins. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, I want to talk about it yesterday. Okay, I want to talk about it now, but you ain't want to talk about it yesterday. Well, I got to talk about it now.
And I mean, it's a whole nother argument, right?
Yeah, and it's crazy. But again, in 2020, there are more things that we have been exposed to. There are more tools that we have been exposed to. So those that are out there right now that you may be in this particular situation, there are more tools that you have the ability to go sit down with certain people and certain individuals. Now, is divorce something that you should be going to? I mean, I'm an advocate for love, relationships. I mean, stick with it, because a partnership is only as strong as the will between the two individuals. Because Absolutely. If you two want to do it, you will do it. But you have to figure out how you're going to go about doing it, and looking at those things that in those responsible areas. But ensure that you look at the tools that are out there. Sit down with, a Chandra or somebody who has the ability to speak to you from so many different levels. If you're a Black woman, she can relate to that conversation. If you're a prior service, she can relate to that conversation. Or if you're in church, she can relate to that conversation. Seek out someone who relates to so many different measures of you that is going to allow you to open up. Because sometimes the cookie cutter counsel, here's a sheet of paper for you, ma'am. Here's a sheet of paper for you, sir. Write 10 things that you like about him. Write 10 things you like about her. Like, I can't relate to that. That's just how I see it.
Yes. Well, y'all, this has been an amazing conversation, but we are at our halfway mark with Prison Break with Shirley and Shonda. And our topic today is healing from divorce and freeing your mind to move on. And so I know Shonda is bubbling to jump right on in there to continue on this conversation. So if you are watching on Facebook, if you're watching on YouTube and you miss any of this conversation, you need to go back to the beginning because it's real, real good. All right, go ahead, Shonda.
Thank you, Mr. Russell, for the plug. I mean, you said most of what I would have said as a counselor, but that's one of the things that people don't know that they should do. So when people come to me and they're married and they say, hey, I want to do marriage counseling, but my spouse doesn't want to come. They don't think that they need counseling. I usually ask them, well, have you considered counseling for yourself? And then they usually say, well, no, I need marriage counseling. And I say, well, you might need marriage counseling. I said, or you may just be able to work on yourself. Because a lot of times the real reason why we have problems in our marriages is not because of the marriage. It's not even because of the other spouse. It's because how we think about the problem it is that is causing us issues with our spouse. So if I believe that my daughter is precious and that she should save herself for marriage and that she is equal to a man, and then I am married to a man and he is her father and he believes that she should be barefoot and pregnant only, that she should never work outside the house, and he raises her to think a certain way and do a certain way and be a certain way. And if I disagree with him in that, that may cause some conflict between he and I. Is that a reason to divorce? No, there's no such thing as a conflict-free marriage. Happy marriages have conflict. Not only that, but happy marriages have had a lot of conflict because they have learned how to work through it with their partner and get to a place where now they have a template for working through conflicts. My husband and I have a template for working through conflict. Sometimes that template works amazingly. Sometimes it doesn't. That just means we need to make adjustments in certain spaces. And so then we look at those certain spaces and we be honest with each other. And he tells me, babe, you tripping. Or I tell him, babe, you tripping. And then we go about trying to see where we tripping at and try to fix that area so that we can move on from there. Okay. But it doesn't have to mean divorce. Sometimes we jump to divorce because we feel like we've worked on everything in every possible way, when really it could be just as something simple as letting it go. Like, I can raise my daughter the way that my husband wants her to be raised without having to diminish anything that I want to teach her, and then allow her to go from there and figure it out on her own, because eventually she gonna have to do that anyway. That doesn't mean that he and I have to get a divorce right here. Right? Like, if I believe in saving and he believes in spending, it doesn't mean that we have to get a divorce. I need to recognize that he believes in spending and not saving, and I need to put some saving away because he can't do it. Maybe that's the issue with maturity. Maybe he didn't come in learning about money. Maybe he
Right.
just doesn't understand money. It doesn't mean that I can't take precautions for the both of us. It doesn't have to mean divorce, but sometimes it takes us sitting down with somebody who's on the outside of our emotions that can say to us, hey sis, hey bro, you know what? Maybe you can think about this another way before you decide that divorce is the option. Maybe y'all just need to work on the fact that she doesn't trust you. Maybe that's really the issue. Maybe it ain't even got nothing to do with the money. Maybe y'all just had an issue with trust that y'all need to work on. And sometimes it takes you sitting through those issues, and it doesn't always mean that it has to be done together. Like Mr. Russell said something very key. We're all working on change at different points. And so I might be ready for change. My husband might not necessarily be ready for change. Does that mean that we need to get divorced? No, it doesn't necessarily mean that we need to get divorced, but we do need to have a conversation about the fact that I'm ready for change and you're not. We do need to have a conversation about the fact that I am emotional and unhappy here. And we as a married couple need to work on that. We need to discuss that. What do we need? Even if it's, hey babe, I'm the one that needs to go to counseling, not us. Let me go and do that. And then humbling myself and then going and doing that. Part of the reason why we can't get over some of these problems is because we won't humble ourselves and allow the other person to take the lead sometimes, or to sit back sometimes and to really work through what it is that we're asking. We don't understand all that we're asking sometimes. Sometimes I ask my husband to do things that have nothing to do with our marriage. It has everything to do with not wanting to be a way that I saw in the past that I didn't like. But that's not necessarily healthy for my marriage. That might necessarily help me and my triggers, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right. And so we need to begin to communicate those things. And we need to work through some of those hurtful situations, and we need to self-evaluate. And you are absolutely right, Mr. Russell. There are tools that we have in place now that we have not had before. And we need to take exhaustive opportunity of all of those tools, especially when you're talking about dealing with marriage, because I am one that believes in marriage too. It's not that I don't believe in divorce. It's just that I don't believe that people are always happier when they get divorced. They think that they are. They think that they'll be happier. But if you go and if you look at the surveys out there that have been done, 90% of the people say that they're not happier after they're divorced from that particular person. That means that there's a smaller percentage of people that are happy once they've gotten divorced. That means only 10% of those people actually necessarily need a divorce. That means that those other 90% of people didn't do what they could have done. And so you have to sometimes sit down in that space. We always think that pain is a necessary reason to flee, and it isn't always. Sometimes that pain is the pain of change, and we need to allow that change in our lives. We think that because we've always done a thing that it's right and that that's the way it should be done, and that's not necessarily so. We talked about this last week and several weeks in the past. Just because I've always done it doesn't mean that that's always been right. It just means that that's the way that I've always done it. And so sometimes we need to allow for that change, which means pain on our parts. It's a physical pain that I experience when I have to change aspects of myself that has always been a way, but it doesn't mean that it can't be done. Breathe through the pain. And then the last thing I'm going to say, and then I'm going to leave y'all to the conversation, is about separating. Now, this is just a Shonda thing. This is not necessarily a counselor thing or a spiritual thing. This is just my personal belief. I don't believe the separation works, period. That's for me, because there's no way that you can work on what needs to be worked on if you're separated. you have to lean into each other in order to come together to find the solution. Now, whether you lean into each other with a third party as a scaffold or a crutch until you don't need that third party to help mediate anymore, whatever it is that you got to do. But going like this in order to come back like this, it doesn't work. You can separate, but that distance is just going to create more distance. It's just going to create more space. It's when you lean in and you share space. It's when you lean in and you feel the other person's hurt. It's when you lean in and allow yourself to be softened that the two of you can come back together as one. And that's me again. That's a personal visualization based on what it is that I've seen and what it is that I think. But I just think that we all can do more to fix our problems, and that's just the gist of what I had to say.
That's very true. Yeah. You had something, Mr. Russell?
Um, so I mean, everything you said was definitely beautiful and spot on. But then when you look at healing from divorce and freeing your mind to move on, it's going to have to take a level of forgiveness.
Definitely. Hmm.
Like for me, I I personally called both of them. Of course, at different times, I've called them personally and asked for forgiveness, because I know if I was ever going to want to free myself, to allow myself to absorb everything that I know that is supposed to be mine, I'm going to have to release something. So I personally made those phone calls and said, you know what, I don't hate you. We were this age, blah blah blah. So I'm not even really calling to get a response from you. I'm calling because I feel this is where I am in my life, that I'm calling to ask you for forgiveness for the things that I have done. I'm not pointing a finger on anything that you felt that you could have done different, or you felt that I should have said or didn't say. I'm calling for me to ask you to forgive me for the things that you feel that you can forgive me for, whatever it is. But I had to do that. So to me, if you're going to begin to break down walls, if you're going to begin to have new conversations, if you're going to begin to have a different stance on a relationship, there's going to have to be a level. And when I say a level of forgiveness, that means you might not be ready to just let everything go. You have to have a level of forgiveness with the ability to work on the other things when you're ready to work on the other things. So that's what a level of forgiveness really means. Like, you just have to have it, and you have to want to have it, because now you begin to understand your triggers a lot more, especially when you go into another situation to where you're like, okay, you know what, I'm done. Like, hold on. I mean, the man just left his shoes in the living room, and now you just shooting off at the mouth at him. But that's your
Right.
trigger. But it's his
Right.
shoes. Yeah, but you're gonna go back and forth, be like, you know what? That was something that probably should have been left way back in that
Right.
other relationship. But
Right.
again, a level of forgiveness should be expressed, explained, and understood, because that level of forgiveness should not transition into a trigger for the next person. But it is something that you acknowledge. Big difference from acknowledging and a trigger, but acknowledging it, like, you know what? Come on, let's sit down. Let's talk about this. Now, I noticed that these shoes been here since Tuesday. You know, you're going to have a different conversation because you've developed a level of forgiveness. Now, I know these shoes been sitting here since Tuesday. I probably could have picked it up, but I really wanted to see if you were going to pick it up. You know, I don't want to get upset, but I know I love you enough that I probably should have picked it up, but I still want that to be inside of you to pick your shoes up and just put it in there. No, I'm not upset. I'm not even nagging, but I just want to have this conversation. I mean, it's different. You know what I'm saying? Having a level of forgiveness would allow you to understand that you need to have a level of conversation with that person, and then they may receive it different. That's just my thoughts.
Can I ask a
That's
question,
real
Mr.
good.
Russell? Because I know that there's some women out here who's thinking this, and this may be a little bit off topic, but since you opened it up, I have to ask. What do you do when you've responded in a mature way to a trigger and your spouse kind of pops off at you and they continue to do that? Like, at what point do you say that's enough?
Um, that goes back into something that I said before. I don't know if it was on this show or another one. The absorb, the reflect, and then release. You're only going to absorb so much.
Mm-hmm.
You're only going to take in so many conversations. You're only going to hear so many things, and then you got to look at the relatable now. Absorb, relate, and then release. Now, okay, I relate. He should relate because I spoke to him or her about this particular thing. Now, I'm either going to release it and pop back off, or I'm going to release it and say, I've tried. So I'm going to need you to do this. This is not an ultimatum, but this is a conversation that I don't desire to continue to have again. So that means that you are blatantly doing this. This is not
Mm-hmm.
subconscious anymore because
Right.
we are consciously having this conversation. So then if you still refuse to do this, that means that is your personal energy that you're putting into not doing it, period. And you just like, to me, I
A
mean,
level of disrespect.
man, I've learned so much on how to use the word level in certain things. It allows people to hear different. A level
Mm-hmm.
of forgiveness, a level of understanding, a level of disrespect. Like, you know what? You're not all the way disrespectful. You just have some level of disrespect every now and then. You know what I'm saying? It's that allows, again, for you to absorb it differently, to relate to it. Like, okay, yeah, I can relate to that. And then you reflect back, because your reflection should be a level of the conversation or a level of the energy that you absorb before you get it back out. So yeah, you have to take that leveled approach. But if they straight up disrespectful, man, I tried. I tried. I tried on this date. I tried on that date. I tried in this situation. I tried in that situation. So it's all on you, player. It's all on you.
That's good.
Mm, that's really good.
Yes. So I have there's some other questions that I kind of wanted to go over and just sit and deal with, because we are talking about because we it kind of seemed like we flipped over to the whole marriage side of it. And trying to keep it together versus allowing it to get to that point of divorce, which is always the best thing, trying to keep it together if you are together before you get there. So there are some things I know there are some things that gets a person to that point of divorce, where divorce is the only option that we can see in our heads right then. So for me, at this point of life, adultery is an absolute no go, because that is a we're gonna go back to these levels. That's an absolute level of disrespect and dishonor that I and myself at this point in life will not tolerate. Why? Because it says that you don't give a darn about me. You don't care about who I am. You don't care about any of that. And but I also know that those things have more to do with that person. It is not you. When somebody decides to go outside of the marriage, that's them. That's the demons that they deal with. It doesn't have anything to do with you. So when it happened to me, in the beginning, it was something that I blamed on me. I'm not good enough. I'm not this, that, and the other. So sometimes we take on attributes that we should not. We take on blame that we should not. But there are one, maybe two things that would get me there. Hitting me, absolutely. I'm going to jail. Matter of fact, you go lock somebody go lock me up, because I'm not gonna be hit. And adultery. Those are my two. Them the only two. I can deal with anything else, because I've done the whole adultery thing before. and I absorbed that, and I allowed people to walk over me. That won't happen again. Because if I'm not worthy of being faithful to, then deuces.
I can
Next.
understand that, and I think I can understand that, Shirley, and I think everybody has their deal breakers. So for me, um, there's levels to adultery for me. So as far as my relationship with my, and I don't know that this might be different if I had a different spouse. I might not allow this thing if I had a different. I'm just gonna be real with you, because over our 16 years of being married, my husband has proven certain things to me based on who he is as a man and his character as a person. And so if he were to have like a momentary issue and it was like a one-time thing, it wasn't like he had a whole separate relationship on the other side of town and kids and all this jazz, right? Like I probably at this particular
Been there,
point where
done
we
that.
are, I probably could forgive a one-time thing. I probably could. I couldn't forgive a continuous thing. Now the moment that this becomes a second and third time, that's it for me, because I can't do it. But a one-time thing, a momentary lapse, a single indiscretion, I could forgive that. A single time, we got heated in a moment. We had an argument. I know my mouth is slick. I said something, kind of hit you the wrong way. You put your hands on me a little bit. It might depend on if my face is roughed up. I might could forgive a one time hit. He kind of pulled a Ike and slapped me real quick because I wouldn't eat the cake. Oh, okay, a one time. I, I I might can. I know my mouth. I know my mouth is crazy, Shirley. It ain't no telling what I said that drove him to that point. If it was a one time thing, at
Ladies,
this,
men, I
I'm
just want to
talking
throw
about
a
me.
caveat in there. I know, because
I'm talking about me.
somebody gonna say the counselor said
No,
it was
I ain't say
okay.
this was okay for y'all. I said my marriage with what my husband has proven to me over 16 years. That's what I said. I might take that. Now he gonna get hit back. So we just gonna be two hit people. And if it never continued again from there, okay, then we could stay. We could go to counseling. We could work that out. That's not a deal breaker for me. But ongoing physical and emotional abuse for me, that's a deal breaker. Anything else I could work through. I could work through addiction. I could work through constant
Absolutely.
criticism or lack of
Mhm.
respect. I could work through differing issues. I could work through financial issues. I could work through, I could work through a whole bunch of stuff. But ongoing emotional and physical abuse, that I can't tolerate. I can't. That's
Yes,
a deal breaker for me.
absolutely.
Oh,
But
and
we
one
got
more. Lack
oh,
of
she got ads
intimacy.
on.
Yeah, one more. Lack of intimacy or quality time. That's the third one. I can't. That's a deal breaker for me.
So that's
You
your
gonna
love
pay?
language.
Oh yes, you gonna pay attention to me. Or why did we get married? We could have stayed
Right.
single, and we could have stayed single and did all of this other jazz you want to do. I'm not finna get married to you for you to ignore me. Oh no, oh no,
Yeah,
no.
been there,
That's a
done
that's a
that
deal
too.
breaker for me. That's a deal breaker.
Come on, sir.
What? Oh,
What what are some things that would get you to the point where divorce is the option?
so this is what I call my non-negotiables.
Yes.
So a non-negotiable, like to me, infidelity. Again, kind of like what she said. If it's something that just happened, all right, cool. Because I know I work a lot. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm giving you a hall pass if I have to go to Houston for the weekend and you feel like, oh, I got a Houston hall pass. Like what? You're developing a pattern. So if I have to go out of town,
Mm-mm.
you get a San Antonio hall
Mm-mm.
pass and a Dallas hall
Mm-mm.
pass. No. But if it's something that had taken place, then I'm cool. That's not a non-negotiable, but it's not something that I'm just going to let breeze over. We're going to really have this conversation, and then I'm really going to pay attention to you in going forward. Um, that's really about it. I mean, there's no. I've never been hit by a female, and I think the last time I hit a female was my sister. I think I was like 5 or 6, and the way that switch came, that was
You learn your lesson.
He
man.
got some PTSD,
Right
is what
on,
he
Yeah,
mama,
got.
daddy.
that was the last time. I mean, she literally
Yeah.
braided. I had to go pick my own switch first of all,
Yep. Yep.
and
Woo!
then
Yes, I
the
remember that.
yeah the green ones that bend. So she
Yes.
braided them. So she braided them
Oh, they got you
together.
real good, Mr. Russell.
especially when they wet it. So she braided it and wet it. So I was done. That was my last uh, domestic situation when I was like 5, and that was it. So
It probably took you another 20 years to hold a girl hand after that. You probably didn't even want to look at another girl. They wet it too?
I didn't want to go in the woods. So I mean, so
I'm
nah,
sorry, that's not funny, but
yeah, but
That's
nah. I mean,
hilarious.
the whole physical thing, I can't do it. I mean, I've been brought up, by a good man, my father. So I had a lot of good examples, with him and from him to know and understand that's not the right thing to do. And I won't communicate with a woman that way that will bring in it that type of energy to her to want to raise her hand and to strike me. So to me, that's not anything I had to deal with. So I can't even say that's a non-negotiable for me, because if you hit me, that was a choice. So then I need you to make the same choice that you made, to execute that about face, and to go in the opposite direction of where I am.
Right. And in that order, he said. And
in that
I
order.
just need to, yeah, no, I need to reflect on what you said, though, Mr.
Yes.
Russell, because we as people sometimes forget that we bring an energy to a conversation that can provoke
Hmm.
people.
Oh yeah,
And a lot of
definitely.
times we as women will push it to the limit. I'm not even gonna sit up here and lie. There's plenty of times when I know that I have intentionally pushed my husband to a specific limit. Not because I was trying to hurt him, but because I wanted to get a certain type of reaction out of him. And I had to learn my lesson with that. We were much younger when I learned my lesson in that way. But you can bring a type of energy to a conversation that can provoke a reaction out of a person. And a lot of times we know that we're doing that. So we as people
Hmm.
have to, and this is really just for, I'm really just saying this for men. I just really didn't want to call y'all out there like that. But
Wow.
I'm being for real. I'm being for real because if you have to be careful about which energy you bring to specific people, and a lot of times we don't realize how talking to people harshly or with carelessness can provoke them a certain way. So if I'm a man, any woman that's involved with me is going to be soft towards me. She's going to have a soft heart towards me. So if I'm really harsh towards her, or if I come off really careless towards her, then I can cause her to get her back up because she feels a certain way about what I've said to her. And so sometimes as men, we don't y'all don't take that into consideration. And then we as women don't take our position into consideration either, recognizing how what we say can damage a man in a certain way. We actually sometimes will aim for that particular space. So for men, recognizing that women are soft and that they get their back up, and for women, recognizing that you can't deal a blow to a man's pride and then expect for him to respond to you all soft. It's not going to
Hmm.
happen. So we all have to take personal responsibility in those places. So I just wanted to make sure that I put that out there for my men first, and then for our women. Stop taking advantage of our men in that way,
Hmm. Hmm.
and keep your hands off these men too.
Right.
Thinking
Because
that because he's a
you
man,
gonna
he's
mess
not
around
supposed
and
to
hit the
hit you
wrong
back.
one.
That's right. You're gonna get the wrong one. You're gonna get
Hmm.
one that he might not hit you, but he might shake you so good you forgot why you put your hands on him, and you ain't right.
Hmm.
Keep
He
your
might
hands
find
off of
that
these
weapon.
men. That's right.
Hmm.
Keep your hands
Hmm.
off of these men and stop putting them into positions where they're forced to do certain things. It's not okay. It's not right.
I don't want no part to that
No,
conversation.
you don't have to. I'll take it all, and my inbox is open.
Who? Roger that.
Yeah. So the next question is, how do you deal with a partner who doesn't want change?
You leave them where they are.
Oh,
You
okay.
you you
Elaborate on
you,
that.
you leave them where they are, because if you feel change is not something that is necessary for us to move forward, then I'm going to have to leave you right there, uh, and continue to go into strides in where I'm going. But we're going to talk about it, of course. But if you feel that this conversation is something that you don't want to do, you made that conscious effort and that conscious decision to say, you know what, I'm done. I don't want to continue to do it anymore, and I'm not changing. I'm I gotta move on. You know, it's not right because I know that my direction has to be progressive and forward. So if you want to sit down on the sidelines, I mean, ride the bench. You know, I'm in the game. I'm going forward. So I would say leave them where they are because that's the decision that they made. You can't make a decision for an adult. You can only give an adult a recommendation. They have to
Mhm.
make that final decision.
That's good. So I'm gonna revert back kind of to how things dissipated in my marriage, and so I was all in until it came to a certain point, and when I realized that he was not going to change, I can't change him, and words only work to a certain point. But it is the words that we use, and so I had to stop talking to him about it. I had to go and talk to God about it, tell God how I felt about it, get in my closet and pray, not using my human and intelligence to try to fight the battle, but take it to God and leave it there. Submit myself to God, not to a man, but if I'm submitted to God, then I will submit to a man, right? So that is what changed for me in my mind, that I'm not doing this for a man, but I'm doing this as unto the Lord. And when I learned how to talk to God about the situation, tell him how I felt about the thing, give him my heart's desire, he did exactly what I asked. And the enemy could not stand anymore. He could not stand. And I'm not calling my ex-husband the enemy, because he's not, because that was a spirit that was using him. Um, but um, giving it back to God and realizing that we aren't anyone's God, that they are God's child. They not our child, right? So we can't change anybody. But when I got into a right, proper perspective of what I was dealing with and stopped trying to fight it on my own, and doing what I was supposed to be doing, because a lot of times we blame. I think I talked about this last week, that sometimes we blame what's happening on other people and we get stuck. But when we decide to do what we're supposed to do, like just like you said, Mr. Russell, moving onward and what you say, forward and onward, that's the thing. Like, if you want to sit there by yourself, then go ahead. But I've got a mission and I'm on. And so because I'm on not just my mission, but I'm on the Lord's mission, I don't want to be left behind. So if you want to sit there, go ahead. But I've got to go. And that starts mentally. That starts in your mind, where you're able to be like, okay, well, I still have to do this thing because I know that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Or when I was able to do that, everything turned out, I believe, the way that it was supposed to, in that moment. So, allowing ourselves to take our hands off the wheel, give the control back to God where it belongs, and that's part of having self control, and that's one of the fruits of the spirit is that self control. And so, learning how to govern ourselves according to what we are supposed to be doing. I think it takes a whole lot of heat off of us. It takes a whole lot of anxiety out the picture. It gives a certain level of freedom that can't be had in us trying to control somebody else. We can't control them. So doing
Mm.
what we're supposed to be doing is a grand thing. And I appreciate having my eyes open to that fact that it's not up to me. Somebody else isn't up to me. Come on, dead space. Fill it in.
I think it's my turn.
Yes.
Um, let's see. So just jumping off of what you said, not controlling the other person. Sometimes things that we get our backup about are things that we don't have to get our backup about.
Mhm.
Like, we can leave them alone as far as the other person is concerned. So back to Mr.
Mhm.
Russell's example about the shoes, right? And you talk to the man about the shoes and the man don't want to move his shoes. You can either leave them there and let him do it when he does it, or you could do it yourself and be quiet about it. But either way,
Mhm.
you need to decide in the beginning which of your spouse's negative behaviors you consider negative that you can live with, or not. At the end of the day, can you wake up every day and his shoes are out there in the middle of the living room? Is it going to bother you that much for the next 25 years that you just cannot live your life happily with this man because he consistently leaves his shoes in the middle of the floor? No, like, you don't have to break up because of that. Okay, good. Then what are some things that you can do to avoid the negativity and the conflict? What are some ways that you can have the conversation that you need to have in order to get the other person to understand your viewpoint, and then move on? And then what do you want to do about it? Like, do you want to just kick the shoes to the side? kick them to the side, whatever, keep it moving. But everything does not necessarily call for a dissolution of your relationship. Can you make adjustments? Can you personally, is there anything that I can do to make an adjustment? Is there anything that me speaking to this person about the adjustment can do? Deciding for myself, if they're not willing to change, and this is a question I ask when everybody comes to marriage counselor. If they're not willing to change, is this something that you can live with for the rest of your life? Is it going to drive you crazy to live with a person that balls up their socks and leaves them in the corner of the room? Can you live with it? Is it going to kill you? Is it going to bother you that much? Is it going to hurt you that bad? And then sitting down and really discussing, but you can't control another person's change. You can't control when they change. You can't control how they change. You can let them know how them not changing hurts you and affects you, but you cannot force another person to reach change. And you also have to understand that change is a process too, just like grief. And it doesn't always start out with action. Sometimes it takes a person thinking about that change and conceptualizing that change before they begin to make change. And also too, it depends on how hurt they are in the past about whether or not they're willing to make change. And sometimes we don't take into account how a person's behaviors is affected by their trauma, including our spouses. Sometimes there's hurt things in their past that haven't been healed that are making them be this way. Sometimes we just need to be patient. And sometimes it just requires us to get outside of ourselves. But everything at the end of the day needs to come down to whether or not you're honest about the way that you feel about it. Are you making this a big deal or are you not? Can you live with this or can you not? Have you spoken about this or have you not? And really deciding for yourself, like, what is a good space to call it quits? Not because you're tired of talking, but because you've exhausted all options. Tired of talking is not a reason to get a divorce. If tired of talking was ever a reason to do anything, none of us would ever have kids. Nobody would ever get a degree. Nobody would ever be a CEO in their business, because you have to continuously tell people over and over again different things. I can't tell you how many times I've told my sons not to leave the toilet seat up. I can't tell you that. After a certain point, they get it and they don't do it no more, right? And then after a certain point, me and my daughter don't even ask no more. We just put it down when we go in or put it up when we walk out, whatever. We've taken personal steps. But I've told them over and over and over and over again. At some point, they got it. It didn't happen the first 12 times I told them, though. Sometimes it took a little bit longer for that. Sometimes something has a click for them. For my oldest son, he didn't come from a place where they did that at. You better watch where you're going when you go in the bathroom. It took some time to make that change. He had some things that he had to deal with from his past before he made that change. Sometimes you just got to be patient. Sometimes you just got to know that some things you just have to be patient with. Brainstorm, discuss solutions, work together, try really, really hard. But at the end of the day, you can't force people to change. And at the end of the day, if that person is just inconsiderate and you saying goodbye, well, just recognize that there's a process for that too. Just do what you can. Just do what you can on your end, because that's all that you can say that you're responsible for is your own particular responses to different things. Take responsibility, for your own actions and your own thoughts and your own conflict management and your own maturity and growth in your relationship. Take charge of those things and worry about those things. A lot of times, whatever that person was doing won't even be a bother to you anymore after that, once you take responsibility for your own growth and your own change.
Absolutely. That's so good, Shonda. Y'all, we are almost out of time. We literally have 3 minutes to go, but I want to end on this because we are talking about healing from divorce and freeing your mind to move on. I want to ask the counselor, we don't let her end with this, for everybody to marinate on. What are some conversations every divorced person should have with a new interest before marriage?
There's some questions that there's some conversations every person needs to have with themselves and with whoever their potential is after they've been divorced. So if you're getting ready to go into a new relationship, you need to ask yourself and the other person, how do you view marriage? Is it a covenant for you or is it a contract for you? How serious is it for them? How do they understand what marriage looks like? Do they have children? Do they want children? What do they think about the role of a co-parent? If you have children, this is something that definitely needs to be discussed. How do you view children coming into the relationship? How do you view the role of co-parenting? How do you view money? How is your credit score? What's your financial portfolio look like? Do you have any old debt? Do you have a bad credit score? How do you believe that money should be managed? Another thing that you need to talk to yourself and to others about before you get married is, what are your beliefs? What is your faith? Do you have a religion? Is it serious for you? How does that inform your decision making process? Like, the things that are important, that you know are important to you, you need to have discussed them with yourself first. You need to get an understanding of yourself and your own motivations first. And then you need to have those discussions with the other person, because you need to know. Sometimes we don't ask these questions before we get into relationships, and we get in, we find out that not only is this person a Muslim and that they don't eat pork and you love bacon, right, but that they doing all the grocery shopping, so you ain't got no
Right.
choice. It's like,
Right.
now you done got yourself in a situation where one simple little question could have answered that for you and saved you some
Right.
heartache. You know what I mean? These are questions that need to be had. Some stuff can be negotiated, can be worked through. My husband is a morning person. I am not. Don't talk to me before 7:30, and definitely don't talk to me before I've had coffee at 7:30. I don't want to talk to you at that particular point. But he is chipper in the morning when he wakes up. He rolling. He got those those are things that can be worked around. He let me sleep in and I don't bother him at 5:30. That's just how it works. Okay. But everybody has to work that out. And you need to get to the point where you have worked on that level of forgiveness for yourself and for your past. And you need to check in and make sure that the person that you're entering into a relationship has worked on their level of forgiveness for themselves and for the past. And you can't dictate that, but you definitely know, coming out of a marriage, coming through a divorce, that you don't want to get entangled with somebody else that has not at least started to do their own healing process too, from where they've been. So those are important conversations that need to be had before you get into a relationship with someone else.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, counselor. Thank you, Mr. Russell, for being on this panel with us, healing from divorce and freeing your mind to move on. Y'all have been watching Prison Break with Shirley and Shonda. We are unfortunately out of time. Next week, we're going to have another topic that's very closely related to this one. It's going to be called Stripping Away the Mask. Because how can you go into another relationship and you still have your mask on? So, stripping away the mask will be on next week. You have been listening to Prison Break with Shirley and Shonda, special guest Mr. Ronnie Russell. And y'all just have a phenomenal day. Make sure that you keep your dials locked on 98.5 FM. The next voices that you will hear are none other than Marriage Mondays with the Kings. Y'all be blessed.